Thanks, Paul, and good afternoon, everyone. I know I'm the last panel standing between you and the awards, and then afterwards the drinks, but I promise will be a very interesting panel. And yeah, let me start by welcoming to the floor Marta Navarrete. First, Marta is the head of the policy and regulation in the Brussels office of Iberdrola. Marta is an engineer specialized in EU energy regulation and with 20 years of experience in the electricity sector. And before joining Iberdrola, she was working in different positions in the National Grid in Spain, Friends of the Supergrid, European Commission, and Red Eléctrica de España. So quite an expert we have here about grids and electrification. And then after Marta, second comes Victor Horváth, is Deputy State Secretary for Energy Transition in the Ministry of Energy in Hungary. The country is currently holding the presidency of the Council. And he's responsible for strategic planning, programming of the EU funds in the energy sector, utilization of non-weather dependent renewables energies, which I understand is where heat pumps fall in, right? And hydrogen policy. And he's got 25 years experience of public administrations in the fields of strategic planning, EU financial programming, and energy. And as we all say in these situations, last but not least, it's Stefan Moser, which is a familiar face probably for many of you. He's working in the European Commission. He joined the European Commission in the year 2000. So a few years ago. And from 2005 and 2009, he worked in DG Environment on climate and environmental policy, notably greenhouse and gas emissions trading, so ETS, rings a bell maybe with ETS too, we've been touching over in the different panels this afternoon. Transport emissions and air quality, and from 2009, he then moved on to dealing with policy coordination, among other things, on climate, energy, environment, and transport. And lastly, he's recently working in DG Energy, working on energy efficiency and of buildings and products, so all things like eco-design and energy labeling, which is so dear to your heart as producers, and you're probably really interested on. So we really have three big experts here in the panel, and the way we're going to engage with them is that we're going to have a couple of rounds of topics to discuss on, and then I'd like you to also come back to maybe or intervene if there's something that someone says and that you want to complement on. And the first round will be on challenges and opportunities for implementation, because this panel is all about implementation. It's implementation time. It's time to see things done, right? And this calls on all stakeholders, industrial stakeholders, consumers, but also member states, which is why we have a member state representative here, but also on commissions to ease and favor this implementation. And the second round will be on affordability. And we discussed this a lot about CAPEX and OPEX and business models and public-private cooperation. So again, we'll deep diving on market things and dynamics, okay? So, as Paul has introduced me, despite the unusual tie for me, I'm normally quite an informal guy, so I'd like to keep this discussion informal. I'll welcome your suggestions and comments and ask questions at the end of the discussion. We'll have 10 minutes to do that. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce the first topic. So it's, and I'd like to start with Stefan, if he pleases. So in recent years, we all know that in the last 5 years, been a lot of regulation coming up from the Commission, particularly in 50-55 package. And so the sector of heating and cooling is gaining political attention, political tractions, not always the good type, if you think of the European elections and also the German elections more recently. And however, it's significant that heating and cooling were highlighted as a priority in the mission letter of the candidate for the Energy Commissioner, which is something that not everybody was betting on, and I think it's also maybe thanks to the work of some in the room that has advocated for that. And while we remain, very far from phasing out fossil fuels in our buildings, unfortunately, to much of my disappointment, progress has been made. Okay? So now we focus on implementation. I'd like to ask you, Stefan, I'm not going to read all of the things. I mean, so what do we expect? What can we expect, stakeholders and industry particularly, in the next year in terms of documents and implementation and guidance coming from the Commission, okay, that will make this implementation easier? And in all this wealth of documents, what are the most important ones to you and according to you? And lastly, will the heat pump action plan be one of them?
Thanks a lot, Davide. Good afternoon to all of you. Very happy to be here. So I think, as you said, we have now the legislative framework in place for across the whole spectrum of energy and climate policies we need to implement now. For this, we have the tools in our hands, which means basically national plans, national energy climate plans more broadly, but also for the buildings, the national building renovation plans to be set up by the end of next year as drafts, so for which need to be consulted thoroughly. We have the instruments in the EPBD, in the EED, and also the Renewables Directive. We have the emission trading scheme extended to buildings. We will, from the Commission side, facilitate implementation of all this through guidance documents and implementing legislation, so delegated acts, implementing acts as provided by these directives, which means in practice exchanging views on what is actually to be done, what we need to do together, what is the understanding of the legislative framework, how do we make the best out of that, and how do we further bring forward, advance system integration, energy system integration, the big picture basically. For heating and cooling, this means being part of the, I would say, overall need to electrify further our societies. For the buildings in particular, electrify heating and cooling. And in the mission letter of our Commissioner designate, Mr. Jørgensen, an electrification strategy has been anchored. It's one of the major policy initiatives which our President, Ursula von der Leyen, has identified, and that will include all aspects related to electrification. The precise content, of course, will be up for consultation, further elaboration, but it's obvious that for the building sector will play a major role in that as one of the major sectors to be electrified. The tool for that will definitely be also very largely heat pumps. It is therefore the comprehensive look at this electrification challenge with all the side links and cross links to the grids, to demand response, smartness, digitalization, but also the appliances which are used for that. So I think that answers your question about heat pumps. This will be taken within that package, I would say, of a broader strategy. Identify the obstacles, the barriers, how to overcome them, and how to ensure that basically we tackle these challenges in a cross-cutting manner. I think that's very important. And then we will have to see in relation to concrete policies, lots of them will have to be defined at member state level through the building renovation plans, but also the work under the Energy Efficiency Directive on municipal heating and cooling plans for municipalities above 45,000 inhabitants, which is also a major task, to see really the big picture on heating and cooling in the implementation, what are collective solutions, what will have to be done individually. There will have to be an optimization for buildings, for types of buildings, for neighborhoods, to be achieved by member states to reduce costs as much as possible. Affordability is a major concern. Competitiveness for industry, affordability for citizens. This is at the heart, I would say, of the Commission's agenda. It will have to be married with the need to decarbonize, to green the economy. It's not a contradiction in any way. We need to find the right balance to optimize basically the policy tools and measures which have to be put in place. And of course, there will need to be financing, attention to skills, to sufficient numbers of workers, of skilled workers, of making sure we have the right technologies, we have the right policy signals, incentives, but also regulatory tools Eco-design was mentioned. There, of course, we continue our work, and for each product we try to find the right balance here as well, in close consultation with stakeholders, recognizing that there are different views. We respect that, but of course it's usually going ahead on the basis of a broad consensus as much as possible. So I think that's what I would like to say at this stage, and of course very happy to discuss and exchange views with you on that.
Thanks, Stefan. Just to understand correctly, I mean, so you said that this the action plan, the heat pump action plan, would be framed no longer in a broader heating and buildings strategy, rather on the electrification initiative. Is that what you meant?
Well, the new college will enter office in a few weeks, subject to confirmation by the European Parliament. I'm not the new college. No. I'm just an official. I don't know what will happen. I know what's in the mission letter by our president. Anything which goes beyond that, I don't know. That's basically the future. It's decisions by the new college. It's obvious that within an electrification strategy, there will have to be attention to the building sector, as there will have to be attention to electromobility, and the need to electrify these two sectors, but also industry. And therefore, we need to see what solutions there are to do that to a very large degree. It's not 100%, but it's a kind of, I would say, a major challenge to advance, to move forward with that. And therefore, there will have to be also significant attention being given to heat pumps in that context. Yeah? So, but I don't, for me, I have no mandate to say there will be a separate heat pump action plan. It even makes no sense to have that, because we need to have the broad picture, basically, and make sure we advance on all these fronts. Yeah? So.
Right. And last point on this, coming back to what you said, on the EPBD, there's a lot of implementation to be done, right? So I know that you are working on a definition of fossil fuel, what can be supported financially by member states in 2025. I don't know if I missed it, but I mean, if I haven't missed it, it's probably coming soon. These guidelines from the Commission on understanding what is a fossil boiler, what is not possible to be supporting financially from the member states from 3 months from now on. Is that correct? Do you have any timeline or that you can share? I mean, if you can.
That's a matter of a few days or weeks. Yeah? So it's ready basically. Now it's just to be adopted by the college. This has been prepared in consultation with member states and stakeholders. All the other guidance documents also will be prepared in consultation. So in principle, the content is already known to those who have been involved in that. But it will be formally adopted in a few, days. Maybe, I don't know exactly, you never know exactly when, but it's on track. The other guidance documents will all come, I would say, by spring, yeah? So, or in spring next year. On all the other aspects which are mostly mentioned directly in the directive, in the EPBD, but some of them also, I would say, identified as useful by us, where we got questions, where we thought it's useful to bring forward a kind of convergence of understanding from the discussions with member states or stakeholders, where there's a need for that. And therefore, there will be quite a number of topics covered by that. Yeah? So, but as I said, the guidance documents will never go beyond the directive. They explain, and especially they take up elements which some people think may need to be clarified, and some issues like the definition of fossil fuel boilers will be part of that. It's basically mandated by directive. Yeah? So, what is that? But in principle, it's just bringing together the different considerations, what that is. Yeah? So I think everyone has an intuitive understanding, more or less, what that is. But just to be clear, from what we understand to be a fossil fuel boiler, for instance. Yeah? Because indeed, a very important content of the directive is also 2040, that member states need to put in place policies and measures which collectively ensure that in each member state, there will be phasing out of use of fossil fuels for heating, cooling, basically in buildings. So, and therefore, that is that we need to look at.
Certainly, looking forward to this. I mean, considering that in 2022, I don't know if you know it, but in 2022, last year, we have the figures. The amount of money, public money, that went into fossil boilers was 3.2 billion only in Italy, Germany, and Poland. So we're talking a lot of money here. So it's really something that we're eager to understand. Now, Victor, Stefan mentioned some of the implementation plans that it fall on the shoulders of the member states, not few. I mean, there's the national renovation plans, the national social climate plans, there's the municipal heating and cooling plans, and in addition, of course, to the national energy and climate plan. Okay, so I know that your government is working hard during the presidency on geothermal, on district heating, which are a very important driver for your energy strategy, and also to the surprise of the many, on energy taxation directive. And so I'd like to ask you, starting from the NECP, can you share your country's key priorities for heating and cooling, and explaining how you plan to ensure coherence in targets, resources across the various plans that we just heard are going to fall on your desk or your colleagues' desks, and different plans that address have measures on heating and cooling.
Yes, thank you very much, Davide, for your question. Yes, there is quite a lot to do from the side of the member states in the coming, let's say, 2 or 3 years' time. Coming back to your question about the Hungarian NECP and the directions which we are trying to figure out for the heating sector, is that regarding the technologies, the first priority for us is to decrease the energy which is needed, the final energy consumption of the country, not just in the residential and not just in the heat sector, but also in general. And the second issue regarding the heating sector is how we can move from a fossil-based, I would say yes, fossil-based heating sector. Nowadays in Hungary, fossil fuels account to around 75% in the heating sector, to a greener heating sector until 2040 and 2050. Because in the coming 4 to 5 years term, we cannot switch to a green sector. What we see here is that heat pumps will have quite a big proportion, quite a big say to do in the heating sector, both in the industry and the residential sector. We calculate that in the second part, let's put it this way, in 10 years term, the heat pump as a technology will cover around 1/3 of the energy needs in the heating sector in general. And that will go up to at least 60% in 2050. So we think that there is quite a big room for heat pumps in the residential and both in the industry. And what is also important in Hungary, and I would say not just in Hungary, in the broader region, is that district heating accounts to quite a big proportion of the heating sector. In Hungary, it covers around 20% of the residential sector. And it is also important to have new technologies, for example, heat pumps also involved in the district heating sector as well. But if you may allow me, if I can step back a little bit and go a little bit further from the NECP and come back to the documents which we have to prepare. For us, the big question always behind all of the strategies that we have to prepare is that how we can change the behavior of the people who are involved in it. And that's the question which was also raised in the previous panel. If you look at the residential sector as a private consumer, it's always the question for us, not just from an energy and not just from a price point of view, but from an information point of view. If you have to switch from one technology to a second one, and let's put it this way, in Hungary, it's mainly from a gas boiler to mainly to heat pump or any type of renewable technologies, then that's a new type of technology for the private persons, for the households. So that means what we see is that there is quite a big need to put information on the table for the people in a way that they understand, and to at first inform them what this new technology can bring to them, and then afterwards we can put, for example, also financial incentives to them on the table. And that's also what I see also in my private life. There are a lot of friends who are coming to me and just asking how they can use heat pumps, what is it for, what it depends on, what is needed in the house to change. So at first what you have to do is this information. That's very important also for us.
Sure. Yes, indeed. So I understand that you said 2050, 60% of the heating and cooling coming from heat pumps, or the remaining part would be, like, I understand, is district heating mostly, or?
Yes, and within district heating, we would like to increase. Nowadays, it's about 75% comes from fossil fuel in the district heating sector. The remaining 20-25% comes to 50% from geothermal sources and 50% from biomass. The biomass will remain quite a big important source, but we would like to increase the proportion for geothermal, because in Hungary there's quite good potential, geological potential for geothermal usage. So that will mainly be geothermal through district heating.
Yeah, certainly you have a lot of potential there. We all know about the spas and the sauna in Budapest, right? And so, Marta, so I mean, the 50-55 package has given a very big push for renewables, not as much as we hoped as civil society and green NGOs, of course, but still we reckon there has been a lot of push there, and certainly Iberdrola has been leading the way in their markets, and you've always been known as a company investing in renewables, right? But several issues and several problems remains to some extent unsolved, such as they are also mentioned in Letta's and Draghi's report, the absence of a truly integrated EU energy market, the limited international interconnections, particularly the case of Spain, underinvestments in grid infrastructure, significant curtailment in renewable energy, and the lack of developed flexibility tools like demand-side management, among other things. So all these challenges come at a moment where those who are investing in renewable energies in the territories face strong oppositions at times, and in some situations in Europe, even growing opposition. So now, as we move into the implementation phase, what are the key challenges in scaling up this renewable energy installation across regions that you see as Iberdrola? And how can we ensure that both industry and households can transition to electrified heating and cooling? And lastly, how can Iberdrola and all utilities in general manage the absence of a coherent EU-wide taxation framework that supports this shift? Now, we're not talking about energy. The taxation directive is being discussed now under the Hungarian presidency. We're going to keep it on the positive side, and then we just let's talk about the fact that it's not a coherent EU-wide taxation framework that supports this shift. Typically, we all know gas is too cheap, electricity is too taxed.
Yes. Yeah, so thank you very much. So indeed, Iberdrola has been leading the energy transition in the electricity sector for more than 20 years. I think the figure is we have invested 150 billion euros in the last 20 years, so it's quite impressive. I think the story of renewables is a positive story. Last year, I was checking the numbers, and in Europe, we had records of rollout of solar and wind, so it's a success story. I think we reached 73 gigawatts. But however, we are far away from the figure that we would need if we want to reach the renewable target. So we would need around 100 gigawatts per year in average if we want to reach the renewable target by 2030. At the same time, what we see now is that electrification is stagnating. We are at the levels of 20 years ago in the electrification rate. So the share of electricity out of the total energy demand is around 22-23%. So it's quite low, and the same as 20 years ago. Now you can think, okay, we are good, we are doing energy efficiency, and it's true, that's a positive part. But also the reality is that a huge part of the demand is still locked in fossil fuels, and also that some industries live in Europe. So we have, as you were saying, competitiveness problem. At the same time, we see China that has been increasing their electrification rate 1% every year in the last decade. So if you compare the curve, this is Europe, this is China. So we are missing the train. It's no longer only about decarbonization, it's about competitiveness. And I can give you the example of Spain, where we are starting to see a real problem because of this lack of electrification. So in Spain, we've been ahead of the curve when it comes to the rollout of renewables. For instance, in the months of March, April, we had around 85% of the electricity produced fossil fuel. So we have almost a decarbonized electricity market in Spain. So that's fantastic, right? At the same time, what is happening? The level of curtailment is going up very, very, in alarming levels. The cost of curtailment, and this is a cost that consumers also have to pay, so they have been multiplied by more than 8 in the last 3 years. So, and this is only going to go up. There is a report from Acer and the GRC looking at the redispatching and curtailment cost is going to increase. So what is happening? So we are deploying all these renewables, but it's not reaching the consumers, it's not reaching the industries. And that's when you also get problems of public acceptance, and because people don't see the benefits. So we need to make sure that those renewables reach the final users. And we see 2 key problems that they have been mentioned already. The grids, that's the first one. So the grids haven't been adapting at a speed that we need. Again, the example of Spain, we have recently 6 gigawatts of industrial demand that wanted to connect to the distribution grid. So this is industry that is now relying on fossil fuel that says, I want to electrify. The connection is denied because there is not enough capacity. So this is a big problem. We need to tackle that. I think this is certainly one of the priorities of the new mandate of the Commission, so really happy to see that. The second thing is the incentives for end users to electrify. And there, we are also seeing a lot of problems on the ground. For instance, we are talking to industrial consumers that use heat in their processes and want to switch to an electric solution. And what they tell us is that if they switch, they need to start paying a tax on economic activities in Spain. This is the case in Spain. So if you have a gas boiler, you don't pay that tax. The moment you switch, you start paying. Why? Because years ago, it was decided that we wanted to incentivize the use of gas for industry, to move away from more polluting sources. It made sense at the time. But the framework is not adapted. So if you now want to move one step forward and say, OK, I'm going to become electric, I'm going to rely on renewables, I'm going to be much more efficient, then you start paying additional taxes. So this is a huge problem. And then you mentioned the taxes. I love that statement in the Draghi declarations. Like the energy bill cannot continue being the cash cow of the member state's budget. So this is totally true. Yesterday I was discussing with a Portuguese colleague, and he reminded me that in Portugal they still have a tax in the electricity bill to finance the public television, because
same in Italy.
Yeah, in Italy as well. So some years ago, decades ago, somebody thought this is a good idea. In any case, everybody's going to pay the electricity bill. Nobody stops paying. Let's put a tax. So I was also looking at the numbers. In Europe, we pay, I think in average, is around 40% of taxes and levies in the electricity bill. We also operate in the US. In the US, those figures are around 10, 11%. But then we complain that electricity is too expensive. So we need to tackle that problem for sure. And then there is the other aspect that you also mentioned about fairness, the level playing field between gas and electricity. And I was looking at the figures, from the latest figures that I found from Eurostat, and it's impressive. So in the gas bill, an industrial player pays 2 euros. And for electricity, an industrial has a tax of 28 euros. So a tax of 2, a tax of 28, if you go gas or electricity. If you talk about households, the taxes on the gas bill, 15 euros megawatt hours. Electricity, 89 euros. So it's just, it's no sense. It's no sense. So we have this framework that is fantastic, the Fit for 55, which gives a real, very, very, signal. We need to decarbonize. These are the technologies. This is where we have to go. But then we have all this backdoor where we start, adding obstacles, and so what we need is coherence.
Member states are not walking the talk in that sense, right?
Sorry,
maybe not all member states. Maybe Hungary is walking the talk.
No. Yes, I just wanted to add 2 things. The first one is that I don't want to say any words about Spain and Portugal. But it also shows that the energy transition is how intertwined with those budgetary issues. Of course, they have to be solved. We are also looking at the price of the Hungarian electricity price. That's fourth or the fifth highest in Europe, and that's the reason why we want to change that. There are also some taxes, but not such type of taxes, and not so high proportion. But we would like to bring some changes in this regards. But what I wanted to mention, maybe it's more important for the audience, is that we put up about the grid. How we can connect the heat pumps with the flexibility of the grid. We set up a working group in Hungary because what we are planning is how we can use heat pumps, and they are quite good technology in this regard, as a demand side management on the side of the electricity consumers and also the providers. So we would like to think in a bigger way, I would say, not just look at financial incentives, but how to see if we need more electricity for heat pumps, and we need more electricity for heat pumps. There are a lot of investments into the grid in Hungary for 3 or 4 years now. But we would like to see how we can integrate these new technologies into the flexibility of the grid that would reduce the investment cost for the grid as such.
Yeah, probably also communities can play energy communities could play a role there. But I mean, coming back to Marta, I mean, just anecdotically, maybe you might be relieved to know that 10 years ago, Italy got rid of, from the electricity bill, of the tax on the Ethiopia war that Mussolini waged in 36, probably. Okay, so it took like 50 or 60 years to get away of a taxation that Mussolini introduced.
This is the problem. The electricity tariff, it's used to make industrial policy. It's used to make
the milking cow, indeed.
Public policy, everything. So we need to be serious. If we want to decarbonize, let's be serious about it.
Right. Yeah. So I'm looking at the time, so we'll go quickly to the second round, and then we'll leave some minutes for the questions from the floor. So, I mean, we spent a lot of money after the COVID and after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. A lot of public money was invested, so there was no shortage of courage from the member states, from the European Union, into investing in energy and heating and cooling particularly. But what has not been up to the task for now, except for I have to say, for the industry in the heat pumps, is the private investment. It's been said previously. So I'd like to understand, how is the Commission encouraging bottom-up action to foster private-public investments? Do you think that in the recent time, the recent changes to the energy market are sufficient to unlock the potential of new business models, such as pay-as-you-go, heat as a service, leasing, and what have you for the heat pumps, to overcome the upfront cost for consumers, for instance, and particularly in those countries where consumers struggle with upfront cost of the heat pumps?
I think we need to bring together really industrial policy, a clean industrial deal. Also, that's one of the major priorities for the Commission, with the affordability, competitiveness agenda to really see where support is needed from the public side and where it is an investment which will pay off over the lifetime of the investment, and how to overcome this initial investment challenge. I mean, from the EU side, we have, of course, until the end of this financial period, the MFF, but also the Recovery and Resilience funds. We have significant volumes which need to be spent wisely. For the next mandate, we need to see, for the next MFF, which will be negotiated, we need to see how we can basically optimize the overall volumes then, so that they go into where the biggest added value can be created. But this will always be combined with national funding, and in particular private financing. So their member states are called upon to cooperate very, very, very closely with the financial sector, because the volumes will have to be provided primarily by private actors. It's not possible to finance everything from the state side or from the EU side. Doesn't matter, EU public or member states public. But to see where we have the overall biggest efficiency and can create this in terms of payment models, yeah. So I think there needs to be indeed a rethink of how to optimize the different instruments which we have. There's a lot of work going on in partnership with industry, but also financial institutions. What can be done, and that will be a key priority for the Commission also in the next mandate to go ahead here. So that's clear. I mean, what Marta said also. And I fully agree, and there's also in the report by Professor Draghi, is that we need to clearly lower the costs for energy, so energy prices, by implication also the costs, because costs is of course price multiplied by volumes, so energy efficiency policies come in here heavily. And there we have various tools. Yeah? So on the one hand, think about taxation. On the other one, on the other hand, our charges for infrastructure investments, which may go up. But then we have the efficiency gains also, that less volumes will be needed. That's very important to keep that also in mind. So through more efficient practices, products, reducing energy needs of the building, as Victor has also said that this is a major part of the agenda as well, and then see really what can be an investment proposition for each project, yeah. So and what can be then provided in terms of financing by private investors or private financial sources, and where it would get stuck because it's simply too much of a burden initially in terms of investment challenge. Yeah? So.
Yeah, thanks. On this point, Victor, are you planning to do something in Hungary to promote this new business model, like get rid of the upfront costs, but coming from the market, like leasing or something? Is there something that the government is taking into consideration? And then also eventually also in the framework of the next big thing that is supposed to be the Social Climate Fund, where some money is going to be make available for the member states, and I mean hopefully the ETS2 will be a big pot of money to be spent there, right? So what is your view there?
Yes, maybe my point will be a little bit tricky because somehow I will go against myself, is that there are a lot of money for grants. But the problem with it was also raised by the previous panel. It's about reliability. If a grant scheme is launched only for 1 or 2 or 3 years time, then there's no way to calculate with it in a longer period of time. And for investors, and I would mean also households are somehow investors, they would need this reliability. So we see also, although we launched a new scheme in July, but that not just focuses on grants, but also other types of financial means. But what we are also looking at is what kind of other financial incentives could be provided, partly to the companies and partly to households. And yes, indeed, we are also looking in other financial constructions as well. But here we would be very interested also from your side, from the side of the heat pump association and from the heat pump producers, what type of business models you see as viable for the future, because we do not want to innovate in this regard. We would like to follow the market. And so we from our side would be very open to see what new types of financial mechanism should be feasible directly for heat pumps. On the other hand, what we see is maybe that would be also cheaper for the state. So there's also a budgetary reason for that.
Right.
So we would be very open for having such a type of discussion.
Thanks. And lastly, and maybe quickly, because we're running out of time, but I mean, I'd like to really understand from someone in the market like Iberdrola, what are your projects out there to overcome these difficulties? If you have some ideas or clear situation that you...
So, what we try to do is to adapt to the needs of the consumer, of course. So we work with a range of products to try to offer the best competitive and high quality energy. So we don't just work with heat pumps, we offer really a full range of ideas that adapt to the consumer. So we offer what we call turnkey projects. So we go to see the clients and we see, okay, what are your needs? We study their specific case and we help them with the installation of the solar panels, the installation of the heat pumps, the infrastructure for recharging the car, the insulation of the house. That's quite important. So we give them the full solution. And then what we also try to do is to walk them through the process, because it's quite difficult in the end to do all this. So what we try to offer is better financing conditions. So we have deals with several banks that offer better financing conditions for these products, sometimes with zero interest rate, at least for a few years. So that certainly helps. We are also looking, as you were saying, heat as a service. We are exploring those solutions, but it's in the making. So we are constantly trying to innovate and see how we can reduce those upfront costs. We have also recently launched a specific tariff for heat pumps users, so that allows you to basically you get a discount on the hours that you use the heat pump. So that's quite good, and it's a contract that can go up to 5 years, which I think is quite important in view of what happened in 2022 with the crisis. That all those consumers that had short-term contracts, they were immediately exposed to the volatility of the market. So with this, the consumer has a view. Okay, my price is going to be stable. It's 5 years, and it's good. So yeah, it's a combination of a lot of things that we try to do. Yeah. But again, and it was said several times before, the biggest, the big barrier that we face is the disinformation. So the consumers still do not understand what we call the magic of the heat pump, and it's that 1 unit of energy, you can produce 3 units of heat. So it's 75% of the energy is free. So this is amazing, but somehow this message is not out there.
Maybe you should be calling boiler 2.0, so people just are familiar with the concept.
Yeah, maybe that would be,
We have 1 minute for maybe at least one question from the audience. Gentleman here, but maybe if you don't mind,
So the other one first.
Yeah, over there, because he hasn't asked. Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Marco Grippa from Ecos. I have a question related to Stefan on the National Building Renovation Plan. So this is an ongoing work that will start already this year for the next year and completed in 2 years. I would like to know what is the role of the Commission on guiding this National Building Plan, and what is going to happen if they are not specifically on the direction of the 2040 target for the fossil fuel one. I'm just asking this in order to avoid what happened with the subsidies, that the Energy Labeling Framework Directive was already banning the fossil fuel subsidies and then repeated again in the PBD that finally can be cancelled. Thanks.
Thank you. So the EPBD has already basically a template for the plans. The plans are, I would say, a specialized chapter of the National Energy and Climate Plans. These provide the overall picture. This is a kind of the special plan for the buildings sector. The template is in the EPBD. What we are providing now is a kind of, I would say, annotated template with a few more explanations what we think it means. Yeah? So, but in principle it's not necessary, but that's actually to be discussed with member states to the extent it's useful to have a bit more explanations. The real job and task and responsibility for member states will be to now do a deep reflection and see how we deliver as part of the NECP on the building sector and consult stakeholders. What are the barriers in each member state at the various levels, including the local level, and industry, of course, as well, and how do we overcome them? So in terms of funding needs, skills, industrial capacity, regulatory tools, taxation, and what can be done, and there will be and will certainly, and it's legitimate that there are different views. But the member state government will then have to take a decision in making an arbitrage or trying to reconcile as much as possible to some extent, make a choice in one direction. And we, from the Commission side, will discuss these plans together with the other member states, but also then issue recommendations once we have the draft plan by the end of next year, 2025. So in the first few months of 2026, we'll issue recommendations. In case we feel that the plan doesn't go far enough in terms of overall objectives, or that actually the policies and measures in that plan will not deliver on what the plan actually states as ambition, so the internal consistency, basically. Member states are then, in principle, supposed to take into account these recommendations. If they do it, we are happy. If they don't, we are not happy. But then it depends on basically an assessment. Is it a legal obligation which member states would not live up to because they're clearly not delivering, or whether it's simply a kind of maybe not as nice to have or not as useful as we think, then it's within their discretion and responsibility. If collectively member states fail in the ambition or in delivering on that, there will have to be a review at some point what we do then, because of course we want to make sure that we will collectively achieve the 2030 contributions from the building sector as part of the NECPs, but also I would say the various targets in the EPBD for the residential, non-residential sector, for instance.
So just to understand and close, because we're late, in the national renovation plans, you're not obliged, binded to get out of fossil use in 2040, but you are bound as a member state to have a plan to get out of fossil fuels by 2040. And that will be one criteria that has to be there in the plan.
Yes, a plan and also suitable policies measures, which in principle will ensure that. So what the date is not is basically a ban in 2040 for individual situations if something remains. But in principle, there should be a suitable, the measures and policies should be suitable to getting there, basically. So and that we will assess, and of course take stock, because the NECP and the building renovation plans as a specific chapter will have to be updated, and we'll look along the way, along the trajectory. And of course, at some point there will be a review, and there will also be a review in relation to 2040, because that will be a major discussion for the new college. What will be the 2040 target? So, and then the various directives will have to be adjusted to that to the extent necessary. That's obvious, but not in the immediate future now.
So we have to walk the talk. Now I'm asking you to a round of applause for our experts. And with this, I really thank them for being here. Thanks for a very insightful discussion.